let's talk about indices or indexes. And this is just a way to measure a large group of stocks that arguably represent some broader measure of the economy than just these 30 stocks. And we'll look at the three main ways in which an index is calculated. The first is a price-weighted index. An example of that is the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The second is a value-weighted, also called a capitalization-weighted index, and that's the S&P 500. And a slight variation of that is something called a float-weighted index, in which the capital weights are adjusted to account for the shares not traded. Market cap index means that a stock that is a larger company, and therefore has a greater effect on the economy, will have a greater effect on the index. The last is an equally weighted index, and in this case, each of the components of the index have an equal effect on the index. So let's talk about the Dow Jones Industrial Average and how it works. And it's a little goofy how it works, and it kind of measures things in a little bit of an interesting way. And we'll talk about sort of how they fix these sort of inherent errors. This is a price-weighted index. And so the way this works is you add up the price of all the stocks that are in the index, there are 30, and divide by the number of stocks. And then the return on the index essentially is measuring the return from holding the equivalent of one share of each of these 30 component stocks. This creates an interesting effect for price-weighted indices because a stock with a higher nominal price, regardless of its impact on the economy or the size of the company, is going to have a greater effect on the index. So let's look at a two-stock index example, and let's assume at the end of day one, stock one closes at $30 and stock two closes at $70. I compute the value of the index by adding these up, dividing by the number of shares, which is 2, and I get that the index value is $50, and this is the average price of the two stocks in the index. And let's assume at the end of day two, stock one hasn't changed, but stock two is up by 10%. Well, it's a 10% change in one of the two components of the index, but because it has a higher price, I can see that its 10% change in price actually has 30 plus 77 divided by 2. It actually has a 7% effect on the index. But an alternative day two, instead of stock 2 increasing by 10%, if stock 1 had instead increased by 10%, I can see that this stock with a smaller nominal price has a smaller effect on the index, only a 3% increase on the index. And so whichever stock increases, whichever has the higher nominal price, is going to have the greater effect on the index. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average is the average value of 30 stocks in the index, the 30 stocks in the index. So how is the average price of these 30 stocks $27,173.96? And the answer is that if a stock splits, the divisor is changed in such a way that the value of the index does not change. So a stock splits 2 for 1, its price drops in half. If the index is not adjusted, the index would increase in value when it really shouldn't, because there has been no economic change. Remember, when a stock splits 2 for 1, you own twice as many shares at half the price. It's like getting two $5 bills for a $10 bill. And so there is no economic change. And so we adjust this divisor in such a way that the index does not change. This also happens when you drop an old stock and add a new stock. The divisor is adjusted so that there would be no effect on the index from taking out a $20 stock and adding an $80 stock. So meaning these changes do not affect the index. So let's just go look at how the index is changed. We'll just go very quickly to this spreadsheet. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the change in the divisor from day 1 to day 2. And this is not a change in price. This is not a return. This is going to be a stock split. So at the end of day 1, we're back where we were before. $70 stock and a $30 stock. The sum is 100. We divide by 2 and we get the index of 50. But what if on day 2 there is no change except that stock 1 splits 2 for 1? And so the price goes from $70 to $35. So no change in return, no change in price, the same thing for stock 2. Well, I can see that if I sum these, I now only get 65. And so what I want to do is figure out a new divisor such that the index doesn't change, that it stays at 50. And so I divide the index value that I want by the current sum, and that tells me my new divisor. And my divisor has shifted from 2 to 1.3. If instead of stock 1 splitting, if stock 2 had split instead, then the index would have gone from 100 to 85. My new divisor would have gone from 2 to 1.7 in order to have the split have no effect. So how am I adding up the price of 30 stocks and then dividing by some number to get to $27,000? Well, I'm looking at a divisor that's significantly less than 30. And so here is the current divisor. It is 0.1519, and you can see this value. And let's just see if we can get this to work. So what I'm doing is I'm going to click this, get the prices of the stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I'm going to pull them into Excel. I'm going to sum them, divide by the divisor, and see if we can calculate the value of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So here's the link that shows me the prices of all of the 30 stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and I'll just highlight those, and I'll type Control-C, and we'll bring that over to Excel. So I've added a new tab to our spreadsheet. I'll type Control-V to get the prices. This was the last price. Here I'm going to calculate the sum of the 30 stocks that are in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. That is the sum. And let me go grab the divisor. And here's the divisor. And I pulled from our note page. And so if I take the sum divided by the divisor, I get 27,173.96. If I do Dow Jones Industrial Average, and you can see there's the 27,173.96. And so this is what the value would be if I had held the 30 stocks that have been in the Dow Jones Industrial Average over all these years. The average price of those 30 stocks would be $27,173.96. And because many of the stocks have split and over these many years, the average price of these 30 stocks is now $27,000.